Hi. In this episode of Pedagogy After Dark, we discuss response to intervention that actually works. When teachers head into the classroom, they're told that their response to intervention model will look at a little something like this. There'll be a triangle, okay? And the base of that triangle is made up of students who are going to be academically competent based on the instruction in classrooms. This is going to be the teacher-led instruction, and by doing this, students are going to read and be able to work at grade level. The next group of these students are going to be targeted for interventions, except that these interventions are still going to take place in the classroom. These students are going to need a little bit of extra help, small group work, and that sort of thing, and that's going to help to pull them up to grade level with very little intervention. And then finally, what teachers are told is that this small group of students are going to be the students who are going to need intense interventions, and that these interventions are going to be facilitated by usually an RTI coordinator or other professional in the building. The problem comes when the real life model doesn't exactly look like this. In actuality, what most teachers experience is something a little bit more like this, okay? Where very few students actually come to class that are academically ready and fit and in a mindset where they're going to be able to learn just by virtue of first instruction inside the classroom. That another group of students are going to have to be pulled along by the teacher by intervening for them, so that teachers have to work to facilitate much larger groups and meet a lot of different groups of students where they actually are. And then what many schools are finding, and the reason why RTI models are not currently working, is because there actually ends up being a huge number of students in many schools who have specific academic, behavioral, and other needs in order to help them become proficient and be able to just excel in school. And so what happens when the models actually look like this, but we go in with the expectation of the other model, is that RTI does not function in the way that it's supposed to. Most students do not get the interventions they need, and teachers are left feeling out of sorts because they cannot manage all these behaviors in classrooms, and the RTI coordinator or professional in the building cannot possibly meet all of those students' needs academically, meet with them on one-on-one, create a individualized plan, and be able to coach and help them through this model. So with the staff that we currently have, this model will not work either, okay? So what we have to do is to create a model where the lines are drawn differently, where teacher instruction is going to have to meet this many students, where teachers are going to have to intervene again in order to meet this many students' need, and that there's going to have to reduce the number of students who need intense interventions, so that there actually can be one or two people in the building who are going to be able to service those intense need. And so the only way that this works is by making the actual professional, the teacher in the classroom, a master teacher. We have to change our instructional methods in order to reach more students. So that means my suggested method of doing this is called the SIOP method. It's a research method originally intended for ESL students with intense academic needs, with a language barrier, and oftentimes with behavioral or other components that accompany those issues. And so what we get are students who are really, really far behind academically, that we have to accelerate their growth in pretty much one semester. This is called the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, or SIOP. And what it actually guides teachers to do is to create comprehensible input that is tied with a seamless tie from instruction all the way to assessment. And while we won't go into all of the aspects in this video, this is something that teachers should research, because in order for the RTI method to work, Teachers have to become more effective inside the classroom. We have to reduce the number of students who are targeted for interventions, even inside the classroom. We have to learn to manage classrooms where students are going to be more self-directed. They're going to be self-directed learners in order to free up teacher time to work with other students inside the classroom. And we have to severely and drastically reduce the number of students who meet the RTI criteria. In most schools, that criteria includes students who are failing 2 or more core subjects. Well, if we look around our schools, we'll find that a really, really large percentage of students meet those criteria. And so we can either change the criteria, which isn't advisable, or we can take steps to make sure that those students reduce the number of classes that they're failing, that they increase their self-efficacy and feelings that they are able to achieve and do the work themselves, and that we hire a sufficient number of people in order to facilitate and work with these groups of these tier 3 students. This is an RTI model that works. In order for this model to work, it actually begins with preparation. All right, so of course this means that teachers have to be allotted time to actually plan during their planning period, and preferably with other people. Other people can help us see the holes and the issues with our lesson planning process. But it helps to have a pretty intensive lesson planning format that allows you to think of how you're going to engage, how your lesson is aligned, and how rigorous your lesson is going to be for your students. Because even though we're talking about helping students to meet goals, we are not talking about bringing those goals to them. We're talking about how to get students to grade level and to be able to work at that level. Based on our preparation, we are going to be able to increase or improve our lesson delivery. All right. This means that students are going to be able to understand more of what we say because we are going to give them comprehensible input. This input is going to help them build background knowledge. And in turn, they're going to understand a lot more of what we say. Now, when we talk about building background and making input comprehensible, this has to do with a word that gets thrown around a lot in education: scaffolding. One great way to make sure that you are scaffolding for your students is to look at your state standards across grade levels. And so if you know that your students are not able to address that standard at grade level in 7th grade, then look back at what the standard looks like in 6th grade and 5th grade and 4th grade until you find a place where you can meet your students. And this also actually gives you a roadmap about how to get back to where you need to be. So when we talk about meeting students where they are, that is a great philosophy in education, but we also have to get them where they're going. And so after scaffolding to make our input comprehensible for each student in order to build their background based on things that interest them and that are relevant to them, then our next steps are to address some of the needs that might come up with some of our tier 2 students. These students are going to require us to have a bag of tricks, if you will, of strategies, okay, that make learning fun and engaging and relevant to each of these students. And that is what is going to allow them to get through the hurdle of not understanding and not feeling like they're ever going to understand. We may have to adapt the content for them just a little bit. We may have to include other resources to help them, maybe a few definitions, but in general, we're going to keep them reading at grade level. We're just going to give them a little bit more support. This may mean bringing in supplementary outside materials. They're going to help students understand. But all of these things are going to be grounded in something that's going to help all students, which is interaction. Quiet classrooms are not learning classrooms. So we need to interact with our students. We need to question them. We need to have discussions with them. We need to play games, and we need to allow them to express their understanding or whatever they don't understand. And we can't take those things personally. We can't assume that students who fall in this area are students who do not even desire to learn. We have to push them to increase their motivation to learn at the same time as their academic learning will increase in general. Okay, we have to give them a lot of time for practice and application. before we begin to assess. But it is important that we have assessments that accurately reflect what our students have learned. But this means that at any given time in your classroom, you could be doing informal assessments or formal assessments. This means that we don't always have to put our students in a situation that's high risk and very, very low reward. We can give them opportunities to debate and to write and to discuss things as a form of assessment before they're put in a situation that's very stressful and that's going to require them to bubble in answer choices that are completely wrong or right or wrong answers. And so those opportunities for informal assessment give students a very, very low risk and very high reward because they get a lot out of it. They learn a lot, even from learning from their mistakes or learning from other peers. And so this is an RTI model that works. And with this model, all teachers, regardless of the number of students and the different levels that are going to be in your classroom, can have fun teaching.